Hello everybody! Frayme here from the not so far away past. The original video you're about to see was actually recorded like 2 months ago, maybe even 3 months ago, I'm not entirely sure, because I pre-recorded 4 videos actually, because, well, I was expecting to just be screaming into the void, so doesn't matter whether I upload them now or later or whatever, and not get any traction and, just have the videos exist for a while until maybe a couple months in something could happen. But, well, that's not the case. That's not what happened at all. And, well, I just want to say thank you so very much to all of you who watched the first video. I was so happy to read your kind comments, and now I'm even more excited to get this thing underway. Anyway, what I wanted to say is the pre-recorded videos will be uploaded, well, today and next weekend, though I think one of them is unfit for purpose. We'll see about that. And then after that, we'll finally catch up properly. And from then on, the videos will all be recorded only a couple days before being published. And it's actually so funny. I have this thing where I want to do something like this fighting game project, but I get stuck in this loop of perfectionism where I have a vision of how I want the videos and everything to look like, and then when I'm unable to do it exactly the way I imagined, I freeze up and end up not doing anything. And then last Tuesday, I just figured, screw it, I'm just gonna upload the first video, even if I'm not fully happy with it, and, well, now I am really happy with it. Funny how that works sometimes. Anyway, thanks again to all of you, and with that being said, enjoy the actual video, which is the Street Fighter 6 101 from the perspective of a noob, or something like that. You'll see. Hello everybody and welcome to the first Street Fighter 6 tutorial, Street Fighter 6 Basics. Today I will talk about everything you need to know to start your Street Fighter 6 journey and follow along as I will try and learn the game myself. Once you're in an actual match or in training mode as I am, you can already see that there are a couple of win conditions actually. First of all, as you might be able to see, up there's your HP bar and the HP bar of your opponent. You can win by depleting the health bar of your opponent. Quite simple, quite easy, but there's a second way to win, and that is by winning via timeout. As you can see right now in training mode, there's simply infinite time, but if you're in an actual match, that's not going to be the case. The timer actually ticks down, and once it does, the player with the most HP wins. Let's now talk about the movement. Now, for the movement, you've got a couple of options actually. Simply walking is obviously by either left or right. Pretty simple. You can also jump with the up button, right? You can jump to the left, you can jump to the right. And if you change sides, you can still walk to the left, walk to the right, jump also, and you can crouch. While you're crouching, you can't actually walk. As you can see on the left, I am pressing the buttons, but nothing is happening, so can't really move. So yeah, while you're crouching, you can't actually move. By hitting the directional buttons twice, you can also dash. As you can see, backwards dash, forwards dash. Now, in Kimberly's case, she's really fast, therefore forward dash is a lot faster than backwards. But it really depends on the character how fast you actually are. And there's also one more universal movement option you have. That would be drive rush. Everything concerning the drive gauge and the drive meter up there, we will talk about a little bit later. But just to mention this as well, right now, you can drive rush like this, right? You can press the directional input towards your opponent, then hit L2 or drive parry, whatever you decide to bind it to, and then again the directional input, and that's how you drive rush. There you go. You can also input drive rush by holding drive parry and then tapping the directional input twice towards your opponent, but that's a little bit slower. Right, so if you can try to implement the first version I mentioned. Also, certain characters have special attacks or special moves or special utility that they could use. That's also movement. For example, there's a teleport. Like that. Also, there are, for example, runs, right? Just Kimberly, for example. But that really depends on the character. Gotta have a look at your moveset if you decide to play a different character, right? But generally speaking, a couple of characters do have more movement options depending on their kit. Alright then, let's have a look at what really matters. Attack. Now, there are certain fighting games that operate with 4 attack buttons, and there are fighting games that operate with 6 attack buttons. Street Fighter 6 is a game that operates with 6 buttons. Meaning, let's have a look. You get light attacks, medium attacks, and heavy attacks. But you get a light punch, a light kick, a medium punch, a medium kick, a heavy punch, and a heavy kick. Now, obviously, that'd be too easy, right? We can't have things be easy. No. Because if you decide to crouch, well, look, would you look at that? That's a different attack. Well, it's still technically speaking your light punch, but it's now the crouching light punch, meaning its properties are different. It hits low, different attack, right? Same goes for pretty much every other normal, right? Different, right? So that's what normals are all about, right? They're normal attacks that every character has. You get the standing normals and the crouching normals. Also, very important, every character has this, right? Throws. Staple in fighting games, no matter what fighting game, really. Throws are always very jazzy, and you can execute them by pressing punch and throw simultaneously, namely the light versions. There you go. But there are also 2 throw versions. One that I just shown you is the forward throw, and the other one is the backwards throw, right? Just hit it, and now you're on the other side. Lovely. But let's stop talking about things everybody gets, and instead talk about things only certain characters get. The special attacks, or specials. Every character has unique moves that only they possess, and that are very different in how you actually get them. For example, Kimberly, right? Kimberly has a couple of specials. There are these ones, right? You get a light version, a medium version, and a heavy version, right? To get this, you actually need to get some motion inputs, right? So you press down, forward, into the punch, either light, medium, or heavy, and then you get this, right? Also, if you do it with the legs, you get the run. You can do many different things from a run, but generally speaking, specials are unique to the characters themselves and very different from each other. Also, important to note is that there are certain, well, let's call them unique moves that characters get that aren't really classed as specials, but still not every character has them, and they're specific to the character, but they're not like really that special. They're more like normals, but unique normal. It is kind of weird. Certain games call them whatever, certain games call them unique moves, whatever. I don't really know, but for example, this would be a unique move, right? Only Kimberly gets this sort of slide, right? It's very weird input, right? I mean, the input is not strange itself, but it's different to a normal input, and it's not quite as complicated as the special input, so I don't know whether this counts as a special move, but yeah, just it's important to have a look at your entire move set, right, so you don't miss these kinds of moves, but yeah. What I would also like to mention is that there are certain archetypes of moves. If we're talking about normal moves, every character has a jab. The jab is the fastest move you can throw out, and in most cases is simply the light punch, right? Very quick move you can just throw out to poke with, well, okay range, I'd say, and that's more or less just the jab. There's also another type of move that's very funny, and that's the sweep, right? Many characters, or pretty much every character, has a sweep, like so. What makes a sweep a proper sweep is that, first of all, they're normal, right? But they knock down your opponent with just one move, right? One move, knock down. Great range as well, right? That's probably the move with the most range out of any of the moves Kimberly has, for example. And the issue with sweeps is that they are incredibly unsafe. If you have a look how long it takes me to perform this sweep, right? Let's just say my blocks my sweep, right? As you can see, if Maya now decided to counter me, I would die. No matter what I do, if I just throw this out randomly and my opponent blocks it, I'm very, very vulnerable to being attacked. So be aware of that. Then also, there are anti-air moves. What are anti-air moves? Well, if you jump, you're in the air. Quite simple. And let's be honest, this is a really, really easy way to engage your opponent. Because what can you do? Well, you can anti-air. Anti-air moves simply means that whatever you do, you can hit somebody who's jumping at you, right? Like so. As you can see, try to get in, I say no, and I anti-air him. There are a couple more intricate anti-air moves, but Kimberly's easiest way is just the elbow, right? But basically that's what an anti-air move does. It can be a special, it can be simply a normal attack, right? But that's what makes an anti-air, just to counter an opponent trying to jump in. Okay, not like that. Also, there are launchers. Now, what does the launcher do? I think you can guess, right? A launcher, obviously, does this. Launches your opponent into the air, upon which you can land a great combo, right? Get some more damage in. That's what a launcher does. Pretty simple, but an incredibly invaluable tool in your kit. Lovely. Another incredibly important archetype of move that is almost always a special move is the notorious fireball. I, as Kimberly, do not have a fireball, therefore I will just switch over to my. There we go. And as you can see, that's a fireball. Now, it might not look like an actual fireball, but that's just how terms in fighting games are being established, right? There once was a fighter that had an actual fireball, threw an actual fireball out, and since then, every projectile you throw is called a fireball, alright? So yes, this is a fireball, okay? Lovely. The same goes for DPs, or dragon punches. An incredible tool when it comes to anti-airing somebody. I'm just gonna show you a clip because, again, Kimberly doesn't have a bloody DP, right? And Maya does neither. But dragon punches, incredibly important, mostly found on Shoto-like characters. So if you've got a DP, know when to use it, right? Great combo ender, great anti-air, very invaluable. Also, something that's very, very great is a command grab. Same again, I'm going to show you a clip here because Kimberly and Maya don't have command grabs. Frayme from the less far away past once more. I don't know why I said this. Kimberly does have a command grab, and it's one you actually use quite frequently. So I've got no idea why I said this, but let me show you what a command grab is with Kimberly. I could do a combo, which at that time when I recorded the video, I didn't know how to do this, but basically this combo here, get a command grab right here. That's a command grab, and then obviously you finish the combo. That would be the non-EX version, so that's a command grab Kimberly has. You can actually use this as an anti-air, but it's very finicky and it doesn't work if your opponent does any attack in the air. So that's not necessarily what I meant by command grab, but obviously what I meant was more of a Zangief type, which is the classical Street Fighter grappler, right? Here you would do something like this. Mate. Okay, so like so. There we are. And that's a typical command grab. Zangief has a couple of those, but I'm too idiotic to execute them, and I don't want to learn how to execute them because I'm not going to play Zangief. Anyway, back to the original video. Command grab basically is almost exclusive for grapplers, and what it does is it's almost like a throw, but you can't counter it by just pressing throw. And once you're hit, you get absolutely manhandled. It's a lot of damage. It can be really annoying if you don't know how to counter it. So command grabs, very, very great tool for grapplers. One more thing I want to mention is a stance, or rather stances, because there are certain characters that can switch in and out of certain stances and change their moveset accordingly. Now, one of those characters is Chun-Li, which I will show you right now on screen. If you press a certain special type move, you go into a different stance and then can access moves that you otherwise cannot access. Now, there are certain fighting games where there are characters who have actual stances they can stay in for the entire fight and have a completely different moveset, but luckily that's not the case in Street Fighter because I would go absolutely mad. But still, stances, important to note that if your opponent suddenly stands very, very awkwardly, they might be in a stance and might be able to use moves they could otherwise not choose. But also, if you want to learn a character that has a lot of different stances, or two, it's kind of difficult, right? In Street Fighter 6, I don't think it's too difficult to learn, although I haven't actually attempted it, so my opinion on that might not be all too reliable, but nonetheless, if you want to really start with fighting games, you maybe shouldn't pick a character that has different stances. Alrighty, let's talk about super moves now. Or supers. I mean, I don't actually, I think they're just called supers. Anyway, so supers. What do supers do? Well, every character in Street Fighter 6 has 3 different supers. A level 1, a level 2, a level 3. As you can see down there, there is your super meter. Now, the super meter can fill up to 1, 2, and 3 stacks. It can even fill up further and then shows, instead of the 3, a critical art. I think it's just CA, right? And once you've got that, your level 3 does even more damage and has a little cooler animation, which is also lovely. That's important to note. So if you just hit 3 stacks of your super meter, you don't need to use your super immediately. You can just wait and get the critical and deal a little bit more damage. Now, what are these actual supers? Well, they're kind of difficult to input. I will show you if I can pull it off, but basically, let me show you what Kimberly's ultimate super is. It's this, and as you can see on the bottom left, the input is kind of complicated. In actuality, it's not that complicated, you just gotta remember which is which, right? But basically, if I wanna pull off another, that'd be her level 1, which is the same input, just leg punch instead of the... Did I say leg punch? Wait a minute, did I just say leg punch? I mean, a kick, that's the word. A kick instead of a punch, right? And then also, you got this one, which is just backwards and with the punch as well. So that's how you just get your supers. Some characters have unique supers that have more utility, but if there's only damage to be achieved, they're a great combo ender if you've got the super meter available to just get that little bit more damage, maybe get the kill if you couldn't otherwise, and overall just, you know, get more damage. All right then. I want to talk about drive gauge, or your drive meter, or whatever. As you can see, underneath your health bar, there's the drive meter, right? And there are lots of different things you can use this drive meter for. For example, as I've already mentioned in the beginning, you can drive rush, right? Great way to skip the neutral and just engage your opponent, get your combo in, and whatever, right? You can also use drive impact, which is, yeah, quite the thing, right? Let me just do this. There's a macro, standard, it's on L1, but you can also just press both your hard attacks at the same time, and that would also get the drive impact. Now, what does the drive impact actually do? Well, first of all, it consumes 1 bar of drive gauge, right? And what it does is, it gives you armor, meaning if you get hit, you do take a little bit of grey health damage, but you can regenerate that, right? But also, you can just ignore it and hit your opponent anyway. And especially if they try to hit you while you're doing the drive rush and are not blocking or pressing nothing, you actually get a punish counter and can land an entire combo. So drive impacting is a very, very useful tool. However, However, let me just show you something. If I now switch over the controls to my and just input a drive rush, right? And now I know what's coming as Kimberly and counter it with my own drive rush. Now I get the punish counter. So be aware that drive impact does not solve all your problems, okay? I know a lot of beginners like to excessively use drive impact, and it can work if your opponent doesn't know how to counter it or doesn't have the reaction time or knowledge that you can't just press jab 4 times before then countering with your own drive impact. You can easily be crushed by an opponent that just knows what they're doing, right? So drive impact, very useful, but use it sparingly, okay? Surprising your opponent with a drive impact is the most value you can get out of this tool, right? Other than countering drive impact itself. But yeah, that's what you should be using drive impact for. Very, very useful, but don't use it too much, okay? Also, kind of the reverse is drive parry, right? As you can see, let me just refresh that. You use half a bar of drive gauge to activate it, and then you can hold it as long as you still have some meter left, and it slowly drains you off your meter, right? But what drive parry actually does is it allows you to block any direction, right? We will talk about defense in just a bit, but you can't block lows and overheads at the same time, except for using drive parry. If you use drive parry, no matter where your opponent tries to hit you, you can block it. That's very useful. However, if your opponent, let me just switch over again. So now Mai is going to use the drive parry. Well, look at what I'm going to do. Just throw her, right? Can't hit her, as you can see. Can't hit her, but I can throw her. And it's a punish counter, so a lot more damage. And you should be aware that you're not completely invulnerable while using drive parry, because your opponent can just throw you. And that's also the issue with drive parry. If you tap it, I would just press drive parry for a little bit and then try to move, okay? And just have a look at how long it takes for me to be able to actually act again. Right? Now I let go and I try to move, and now I can move, right? So it takes you quite a bit to recover from drive parrying nothing. So just be aware of that, because you can just be thrown or hit by a combo afterwards, because as you can see, the effect fades and I cannot move, right? So there's a little window where you can be absolutely destroyed. So be aware of that. Use drive parry, but sparingly. Again, there are a couple of more things you can do with drive rush. You can drive cancel. What does that mean? Well, there are certain normals that don't really have a lot of opportunity for you to combo afterwards. So what do you do if you want to combo anyway? Well, you drive cancel. So for example, Kimberly's standing medium kick, right? Great move, but doesn't give you a lot of advantage. As you can see, I'm kind of far away from Mai to really do a lot, right? So if I just try to do this, nothing comes out, right? But how about a drive cancel? See, I hit the kick and then instantly press the directional button towards my opponent twice, and then I drive cancel and can use an attack instantaneously afterwards. Let me show you, right? That's a combo now. Nothing Mai can do after getting hit by that first move. And that's a great option you have as well. But let's have another look. It costs you 3 bars of drive gauge, which, let's be honest, is a lot. So what that means is you need to be really, really careful. You can abuse this a little bit in combos. You can cancel right at the start if you're at full drive gauge, right? Then gain back a little bit of drive gauge by hitting your opponent with a couple of specials, and then get another drive cancel and remain with like 1 bar or something. Hit them again, and then at the end, get another cancel in and hopefully kill them, because otherwise you're in deep, deep trouble. The last option you have regarding drive gauge is drive reversal. It's kind of the opposite thing of drive impact a little bit. It's not only a defensive tool, but it's great as a get off B button, right? How do you input that? You can input it anytime you want, but it's not going to come out anytime you want. You can only perform the drive reversal while either blocking or rising from a knockdown. So let me just show you how that works. And there we go. That's the drive reversal. So yeah, it's a great option to just tell the opponent to get out of your way and deny their Oki potential. Also, important to mention is that once you use up all your drive gauge, you enter a state called Burnout. So let me show you how that looks. Let's say you just like to go for this. As you can see, I was able to get 3 out, as I mentioned before, but now I'm in Burnout. As you can see, I cannot do a lot, right? I can't use any drive meter activity anymore, even though I'm pressing the buttons. And I also take longer to recover when getting hit. So there are certain moves or certain combos that are not perfect strings when your opponent is not in Burnout, but is perfectly oppressive while they're in Burnout. That can actually block stun your opponent while they're in Burnout because they take longer to recover. So that's really, really important to note. If you're in Burnout a lot in your games, you should have a look at that and try to manage your drive gauge a little bit better, because being on Burnout is no fun, and most of the time you actually lose the round while you're on Burnout if your opponent knows what they're doing, because you're just at such a disadvantage. You're at such a disadvantage. It's really, really tough to come back from that when you're on Burnout. Okay, let's talk now about defending. Right, defending. Incredibly important as well, but let's be honest here, attacking is more fun, but you shouldn't neglect your defense. Now, as I've already mentioned, with drive parrying, there are certain heights you can attack from, right? 3 different types. There's mid, or, just standard. This is just whatever, right? You can just block this by holding backwards, right? Or just holding the directional button opposite to your opponent. You can just block that. Or you can also crouch block and will still block it like that. Let me just show you that real quick. So as you can see, Mai is now going to block. Standing block, right? Easy, she can block it. Now, if she decided to crouching block, now as you can see, I'm still hitting her in the mid-range, right? But she now crouch blocks, but she still blocks, right? So it doesn't matter whether you use the standing block or the crouching block. Mid attacks can be blocked any way you choose, right? Now the interesting part, low attacks. They can only be blocked by using the crouching block, right? So let me just do the sweep, for example. You can only block that while using your crouch block. If Mai decided to do the standing block, right? She's gonna do it. Doesn't matter, she gets hit. The opposite is the case for overheads, right? Overheads, let's just use the standing block for now. Overheads, that's an overhead, you see? She blocked it because she's using her standing block. If she decided to use her crouching block, she gets hit. So that's what you need to be aware of, right? You cannot block everything, okay? Obviously, you can use drive parry to try and block everything, but then you just get thrown, right? Or maybe you decide to not use drive parry and just block normally and just guess that it's going to be a low or an overhead, but your opponent says, no, I'm just going to throw you anyway. There you are. So it's important to know that while blocking is most certainly important, and you need to block certain attacks from your opponent, you can't just rely on defense entirely, okay? You need to find punishable attacks or moments where you can go on the offensive and try and put your opponent under pressure, because otherwise you can't block forever. But now you might be thinking, well, okay, throws are annoying then, aren't they? Well, yes, but you can also counter throws. How do you counter throws? Well, let me just go over to Mai, and she's gonna try and throw me. Okay, so let's have a look at how that will look. She attacks, now she tries to throw, I'm too slow, I get thrown, right? But now have a look at what I do. I try to throw her, and if we both simultaneously throw, nobody gets thrown, and what you call that is a tech throw, or teching the throw, right? So by trying to throw yourself, you can counter your opponent's throw and end up in a neutral state again. So that's how that works. Now, we've already mentioned drive parry, but there's also something called the perfect parry, right? Because you can just tap your drive parry, and if your opponent... So, let's have a look at what Mai does now. Mai is just going to tap the drive parry, right? And if I now try to hit her, she can easily block that, right? Doesn't matter where I do it. And that's what you call a normal drive parry, right? But if you manage to use that on the perfect frame, or I think it's a couple of frames you get, it's a perfect parry. There's also an imperfect parry, which means you parry the wrong direction but still manage to get the timing right. And perfect parry would be you get the timing right and you get the direction right. So let's have a look at whether I can get that. There you go. That's an imperfect one. There you go. I will just show you a clip of the perfect one because it is a little bit tough. But there you go. So getting perfect parries is a great opportunity to land your own combos and really punish your opponent for trying to start some offense. But defending has one more important aspect, alright? Because defending is not just about blocking or denying your opponent and not getting hit. Defending is also about landing your hits as well. There are two ways you can abuse your opponent going for attacks and either whiffing or you manage to intercept it or whatever, right? First of all, there's the counter hit. So let me show you Mai again. So Mai is now just going to use a move that is very, very slow but powerful. Her heavy kick, right? So let's have a look at what happens if I simply block it. I don't get hit? Lovely, okay? But there's a lot of time for me to punish this. Let's have another look and see how I can react. So the first option is to just hit your opponent before their attack even gets out. That is called a counter hit. Let's have a look at that. So I know what Mai's gonna do. She's gonna throw out her heavy kick, right? But I'm not gonna let her. I'm gonna throw out my own jab before she can get her attack off. As you can see, it said counter hit on the left, right? That's because I attacked her during the wind-up frames of her attack, right? What does a counter hit do? Well, first of all, you get a bit more damage, right? And you also get a little bit more time to get your combo in, right? A little bit more of an advantage compared to when you just hit your attacks normally. A more extreme version we've already seen. It's the punish counter. Now, what's the difference between the punish counter and the counter hit? With the punish counter, you hit your opponent not on the wind-up frames, but during the recovery frames. So they get their attack off, but they still cannot do anything else. They're still recovering from said attack, and then you hit them. A lot of times you can do this when they try to do something big. You block it, then you counter. Let me give you an example of that. So let's have a look at how that would look. There you go. This is a punish counter. So I blocked, and then on the recovery frames, I used an attack myself and got the punish counter. Now, as you might just saw there, the screen freezes for a little moment, right? In other words, you get more damage and a lot more time to get your proper combo in and really punish your opponent for doing bullshit, right? Or whiffing or trying to get a combo while you are blocking. Also, what we can also discuss is invincibility. Now, there are certain moves that grant you invincibility in this game. Now, we've already seen Drive Reversal, which does grant you invincibility. Drive Impact does not grant you full invincibility, but just 2 stacks of armor. So if you get hit 3 times, you still get hit. But if you only get hit 2 times, the armor's there, nothing happens, Drive Impact still goes off. Also, a lot of supers grant you invincibility. So if you just do this while your opponent tries to hit you, you're not going to get hit. There are also a couple of specials that grant you invincibility, but they're mostly only overdrive specials. What is an overdrive, you might be asking now? Well, an overdrive is simply if you go for a special. Let me just use the run because it's easy to see, right? You're going to use a really long run here, right, like this. And I'm only using one attacking button, namely the light kick. But what happens if I use 2 kicks? Well, let's have a look. There you go. That's the overdrive. So instead of just pressing one button, one attacking button, you press 2 attacking buttons and then you use your special in overdrive mode. As you can see, it also costs some drive gauge, so I can get burned out rather quickly if I use it too many times. But that way, your attack is faster, does more damage, and oftentimes also has a couple additional effects. Let me show you something here. So let's say I use my overdrive run, right? Let me just maneuver come on, thank you very much. So let me just use my normal run here. Pretty great, right? Bit of damage, but nothing else really happens. Now, let's watch the overdrive. As you can see, it's a wall splat, right? Only works with the overdrive version, so be aware that some of your specials, if you use them in the overdrive variant, are first of all invincible, and second of all, grant additional effects, right? Very important. Okay, let's also talk about a couple of options you get when waking up, all right? Let me just switch over here. So let's have a look at what options you have when you get up. First of all, you can just do nothing, right? Very simple, but you just wake up, okay? Very, very simple. You just get up where you stand. But the issue with that is it's not really safe, right? Your opponent can really punish you for it, use their Oki, punish your wake up, and hit you again. So what you can do also is this. Just use 2 buttons while you're getting up and you will roll backwards and get some more distance, be a lot more safe, and overall it's just a very, very great thing to do. It actually doesn't matter what 2 buttons you use, but just be aware that if you press 2 buttons, you will roll backwards, and it's pretty much the option you should always choose if you're a beginner because it's just so much more safe, right? You could also use your DP or your drive reversal or any supers when you wake up. You mainly use them for being invincible and punishing your opponent for trying to hit you right away when you get up, right? But those are pretty much the options you have. You can also obviously just block or use drive parry when you get up, but those options are a risk to say the least, but those are basically your options for getting up. Okay, let's now talk about a couple of concepts I haven't mentioned yet, right? We've also mentioned the drive gauge burnout, but one thing I haven't mentioned is that if you do end up being burned out, you not only have those aforementioned issues of being in trouble because you cannot use any drive move, you get stunned a lot more while blocking, but you also get hit with chip damage. Let me show you. I will now block. But as you can see on my health bar there, I take damage. Obviously I regenerated because I'm in training mode, but I still get chipped, right? I still get chipped while I'm in burnout, even if I block. But it's only for special moves. Normal moves don't deal chip damage. So it's really important if you're in burnout, be careful, all right? Be very, very careful. So when you're in burnout and you're in the corner and you get drive impacted, this happens, by the way. You get completely stunned for a bit, can't do anything, and are basically dead. Because your opponent can land a full combo and it's not all too pleasant. So burnout, not a great place to be in. But also, very important to note is corner pressure. The worst place to be in Street Fighter 6 is right where Mai is currently. If you're in the corner, right, and you're not in burnout, you are still screwed because, well, you can't go anywhere, right? You can't just get out of range, make your opponent whiff, right? You can't poke if you've got a fireball or whatever, can't zone. You're in so much trouble here. If you're in the corner, try to get out, okay? You can do that by trying to punish your opponent when they're over aggressive and try to land a couple of unsafe moves, right? And then land your own combo. Or what you can also do if you're in the corner like me now and your opponent gets too close, just do this. Throw them backwards, and now they're in the corner, right? So using any moves that switch the sides is also very important when you're in the corner because you do not want to be the one in the corner, you want your opponent to be in the corner, all right? I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, but whiff punishes are very important, right? If you're in the neutral game, right? And you just try to find your range, try to poke a little bit, right? Try to hit something, and you see your opponent with a move, right? Like so, like I just did there. You can punish that, right? Very important to punish whiffed moves, right? So in the neutral game, right, try to see when your opponent misses a move and then go in to punish, right? One more thing to talk about, frame data. Now, what the hell is frame data? What's that supposed to be? Well, I talked a bit about landing the drive parry with perfect timing, right? Got a couple of frames there. Well, frames are very important in fighting games, generally speaking. And if you're in the training mode, and you navigate to screen display settings, and then you go to frame meter and you put that on, you can see down there, there's the frame meter. And now you can use any move you want, right? Let's just say I use standing medium kick. And you can see the startup frames, the frames in which the move is actually hitting, and the recovery frames. You can also see what happens to your opponent, all right? Those yellow ones are when your opponent gets hit, they can't react. So in this case, right, I hit this, I've got the advantage of 1 frame, which is not a lot. That's why you can't really combo off this move, right? There you go. Your opponent, in this case, obviously has the disadvantage of -1 frame, and let's see a couple more moves, right? +3, very good. +7, nice, but as you can see, takes 11 frames here to use my heavy kick. So this is a great way to just have a look at all your moves, see what is safe, see what isn't, and take that to level up your game and really build a proper plan to implement and to use during your matches. But where should you actually start learning? What's the most important thing I've mentioned here? Well, it's actually kind of difficult, right? Because fighting games are complex and playing against different humans is complex. So what I would say is you should start by picking a character, okay? You don't have to pick a character that pro players say is the best. You don't need to have a look at any tier list, right? You don't need to do any of that. Just pick a character you like, okay? You can have a look at their kit, right? Their playstyle, whatever, or just how they look, okay? If you think they're cool, just pick them. I think Kimberly is incredibly cool. I mean, look at her. She's a bloody ninja. Anyway, Kimberly's great. I like Kimberly. I like her playstyle and moves as well. And I like her general vibe. So obviously, I'm going to play Kimberly. Doesn't matter if Kimberly was the worst character in the entire game or she was the best character in the entire game. I'm going to play her because I think she's neat. That's why I picked Kimberly, okay? So just pick whoever you like, and as long as you have fun, that's the most important part. But once you've picked your character, I would advise you to go into the training mode and figure out your moves. Now, obviously, figuring out the moves, easier said than done, right? You gotta know all moves. So that means you first of all need to have a look at all of them, right? Then memorize them. That's just happens passively, but you also need the muscle memory to be able to pull the moves off, right? You need to be able to think, okay, medium kick, heavy punch, and whatever it is you want to do, you just gotta be able to do it, right? So to do this, I would advise you to pick 4 moves randomly. Normal moves, and then move over afterwards. If you've got all the normals, move over to the specials, right? But just pick 4, write them onto a piece of paper, or if you've got a second monitor, or whatever, right? Or your phone, or I don't know, right? Just type those moves right there, not their names, but how to actually input them. And then try to randomly pick them. Or maybe there's even a website that can randomly pick them. And then once you've picked the move, just execute it without looking. Okay? Just do it. Then and do that again and again and again, okay? Try to get the right moves off instantaneously, without thinking, without looking at your controller. Get the moves off, right? If you can do that consistently, move on to the next 4. So let's say you start off with your 2 lights and your 2 mediums. Then you can go over to the 2 mediums, the 2 heavies. Then maybe you do the 2 lights and the 2 heavies. Then you can maybe mix it up. Do the light punch and heavy kick and medium kick and whatever, right? Do the same with the crouching moves. If you've got all of that done, move on to the specials, okay? Pick random specials, try to execute them, then do the supers. So that's what I would advise you to do first. Just get the muscle memory down to get all your moves off without thinking and instantaneously, okay? Once you have that, you can move on to other things, and that's it for this video then. You can move on to other things, and those other things we will definitely discuss in some other videos. With that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and see you around in the next video. Bye bye.